Under the sun. One woman, one kitchen, one last beginning. Chapter 1. When I wake up before the sun, the house holds a special kind of silence. My silence, cozy, warm, the kind only people unafraid of solitude know. It's the silence in which I hear myself, and also the creak of the wooden floor under my feet, and the heavy sighs of my two cats, Serge and Blanche. They loathe each other like an old married couple, whose love moved to the next room long ago and doesn't want to come back. Blanche, white as snow, with eyes like cut jade. Serge, black as French coffee. Together, they are my balance and my chaos. In the kitchen, I switch on the kettle and pull from the cupboard a small, warm bowl, one of the few surviving pieces from my grandmother's old china set. Porcelain with a slightly worn golden rim and a little flower that once was pink, now the faded hue of summer gone by. I make myself a bun with anise, an old, cozy recipe as simple as a kiss on the cheek. Flour, butter, eggs, milk, anise, and a bit of warmth. The main thing, let the dough rest. Let it breathe. That's what Grandma used to say. Dough, Jeanette, like you, doesn't like being hurried. I remember her hands, dry, strong, covered in flour, as if the flour itself was born in her palms. When I was little, we got up with her early, even before Grandpa began reading his morning paper on the veranda. She opened the shutters, and the house filled with the scent of garden rose and damp earth. Now, when I work with the dough, everything comes back. Not as a film, no, as a smell, a taste, a faint burn on the tips of my fingers from a hot baking sheet. There I stand, the little girl with a waist-long braid in an apron with starch-ruffled lace, reaching for a bowl taller than her. And there is Grandma, chestnut hair in a bun, green blouse with white buttons. She put the bowl in the oven, not a stove, but a real old oven that survived on its honor and a layer of aluminum tape. Stay close, Jeanette. Dough likes to be watched with kindness, she'd say. I look at my modern oven, shiny, with a grill function and self-cleaning, but inside it lives the same waiting, the yeast's patient, stubborn breath. When the bun cools, I lift it with a spatula, place it on a saucer, and slice it with a knife. The sound? A crisp crack, like the first step on gravel. I eat slowly. Time tea, the bun, slightly buttery, anise-scented, taste of childhood. A taste that reminded me who I was. Not mother, not wife, not grandmother, just Jeannette. At that moment, I am not in Lyon, not on Croix-Rousse. I am where it all began, in a tiny village house with white tulle on the veranda and lilacs under the windows. Serge climbs onto my lap. Blanche, onto the windowsill. Eternal battle for dominance. Even their bowls stand apart or the war breaks out. Sometimes I think this is my whole life's work, maintaining a safe distance between two creatures who tolerate each other only for me. Today is a special day. Today, I, Jeanette Patin, will post my first video online. Laugh all you want. I am 62. I have gray hair, wrinkles, knees that sense rain long before the forecast. I'm in a robe that survived 4 fashion revolutions, 2 style overhauls, and 1 husband. But I have recipes, notebooks, a warm kitchen, and memories enough for a volume called The Gastronomic Novel of My Life. I set the camera on a tripod bought in that electronics store where the salesman spoke like he was selling a microphone to a baboon. You just need to be yourself, said one YouTuber in a video, how to start a cooking blog at any age. He was so young, his beard looked glued on. I press record. Hello, I'm Jean, and today we're baking anise buns, just like my grandmother used to. Into the frame jumps Serge, with the air of someone checking if the light hits his whiskers right. A second later, Blanche squeezes in beside him. Silent and pushy, no greetings. They start to jostle, not loud, not dramatic, with elbows, shoulders, tails, like cranky old ladies at the pharmacy queue. One, I was first. The other, I'm always here. I stand holding the bun like an extra in a movie. In the frame, whiskers, paws, grumpy faces. The bun is nearly shoved to the corner. Well, I guess this video isn't about baking, I said, turning off the camera. It's footage of a war at the counter. Then I try again. I boot the offended cats out the door. Otherwise, people might think the main spice in this kitchen is cattails in every pot. 40 minutes later, the video is ready, edited in a basic editor, with music I picked by ear. It sounded like a Provençal midday. I don't expect thousands to watch it. Maybe no one will. But I did it. I did it. I click the mouse. Publish. And I feel alive. Chapter 2. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd done something monumental the day before. At the very least, launch a ship into open sea. At most, challenged a digital universe where everyone is 22 and has perfectly symmetrical nails. Serge greeted me with a look that screamed, "Feed me, or I start killing." A second later, Blanche appeared in the doorway with a face that said, "You again." He followed me around the kitchen like a hungry inspector. She sat on the windowsill posing as the Statue of Liberty. Only instead of a torch, she had a tail, twitching every time Serge breathed too loudly. They can't stand each other, but they do it with such elegance that sometimes I think, this is a long-running series, and I'm paying for it in cat food. I opened my laptop. My video, anise buns like Grandma used to make, had gotten 9 views overnight. 3 of them, based on geolocation, were mine. 2, probably Blanche stepped on the keyboard. 1, definitely a misclick. He was looking for buns of a different kind. Comments? 1. Whose grandma is this? Please take her phone before she goes live from inside the oven. At first, I wanted to be offended, but then I imagined myself actually live streaming from inside the oven, and laughed so hard Serge ran under the couch. Thank you, Internet. Always warm, polite, and humane, especially at 6:47 a.m. I went to the kitchen, boiled water for tea, consoled myself with the thought that Joan of Arc probably didn't get a crowd of likes on her first try either. Although, to be fair, she had different marketing. Fire, followers, historical drama. I tried to film a second video. Today's topic, omelette with Provençal herbs, and no fur. Camera set, light from the window. Voice, calm, confident. Good morning. Today we're making an omelette that smells like lavender, sunshine, and... Damn it, who dropped the onion? The omelette failed. Those divine creatures got into another fight on camera. Serge ran off in shame, eyes wide, with a sprig of rosemary in his teeth. Like a partisan, I reshot it 3 more times. Once, with the lens cap on. Once, with audio that sounded like a food processor dueling a blender. In the 4th take, the strap on my apron snapped and it folded down like a parachute at liftoff. I looked into the camera and said, "You're watching the blog of a woman who can cook, but has no idea how to film. I'm going to sit down, have a glass of wine, and we'll all pretend this never happened." I didn't upload that video, although maybe I should have. It was the most honest one. Around noon, I decided to call Clara, my daughter. She didn't pick up. Design hell. Projects on fire, clients panicking, layouts falling apart. I sent her a text. Posted a video, 9 views, 1 hater. Cats in frame, my life is ash. Clara replied with a laughing emoji and a gif of someone drinking wine through a straw. I love her. I opened the window. A flyer floated in. Residence home under the sun. Comfort, care, safety. For those who've earned their rest. I haven't earned rest. I've earned salted caramel, vermouth, and a new apron. The flyer was printed on thick paper, featuring a smiling old lady in an armchair. Behind her, a perfect lawn, a happy couple in sneakers, a nurse in a white coat. Only I knew that those photos didn't smell like bleach-washed linoleum, didn't show plastic trays, or TVs that played the Weather Channel non-stop. I placed the flyer on the table, looked at the photo more closely. The woman was smiling like she'd signed a contract she could never back out of. She had dentures, a pearl necklace, and a gaze with no life, with a capital L. I sighed. In my life, there was a cat that threw up at the smell of chamomile, an apron stained with tomato, and a strange little voice in my head saying, "It's not evening yet, Jean." I opened my laptop and started watching videos. How to get followers after 60. Food blog in a week. Instagram algorithm for mature women. One had the title, "You're not old, you're a niche." I laughed. At least someone sees me as a market. I'll take that as a compliment. I edited another video. This time, 3 ways to boil an egg. Sounds basic, but when you cook with love, even an egg becomes art. I uploaded it. Thumbnail, my hand, half a cat, and a mug that says, "I cook, therefore I exist." Clicked, publish. Sat on the balcony. Serge jumped onto my lap. Blanche climbed onto the railing, looked down at me like she was saying, "Well, have the subscribers started flooding in?" No, they haven't. But I'm still here. And if fate throws a retirement flyer at me, I'll throw back chicken fricassee with sage. Chapter 3. When Guillaume said over the phone, "We'd like to come Sunday just to chat," I immediately understood. There would be no just chatting. He never just chats. Even as a child, his chatting came with comparison tables, 2 charts, and the line, "Mom, you allocate cookies between me and Clara inefficiently." He was 6 then. Just in case of invasion, I baked a plum tart. If it was going to happen anyway, I wanted it at least under a sauce of whipped cream. Serge was dozing in the sunlight like a dried-up rat. Blanche was savagely hunting a candy wrapper. At exactly 12:05 on the dot, Guillaume and Maëlys stood on my doorstep. She, perfect blowout, scent of perfume named Success Scent. He, with a tired face, a tie he doesn't even remove at home, and a tense, tight-lipped smile. "Mom," said Maëlys, kissing me on the cheek as if I were a fragile porcelain figurine. "Mom," added Guillaume, hugging me out of reflex. His hugs have categories too: formal, businesslike, and sanitary safe. We moved into the living room. I poured tea, set the tart on the table. Maëlys looked at it suspiciously, like at a baguette after 6 p.m. Kind of food, but threatening to the figure. "So, how are you, Mom?" Guillaume began. "Fine. I posted the video, the anise buns." He nodded, with effort. I saw him swallowing the reflex to ask about reach and monetization. "We wanted to talk," said Maëlys. "There it is. You live in a very big house. You live alone. That's hard." I nodded. "Sometimes it is, but it's mine." Maëlys nodded with a professional, sympathetic look. She used to work in real estate, and in that look I read, "A house is an asset, and you are not a lifetime client." Guillaume and I, think," she continued, "that maybe it's time to change something." "Simplify life," chimed in my son. "Peace, comfort, support. We found a residence. Not a nursing home, no, a modern place." "With a pool," she clarified. In my mind, I saw myself at a pool where instead of loungers, there are walkers. They have yoga classes and a garden. Guillaume tried to speak neutrally, but his voice betrayed anxiety. He looked at me not as a mother, but like a variable in an equation. Loneliness plus old age, stable income, real estate solution. "And what about the house?" I asked. "Well, we could sell it, invest." He hesitated. "It's reasonable." Maëlys added, "We consider buying, closer to school. With the kids, it's getting heavy. We could pool our savings. That's the truth. No pool, just rebalance of assets." I looked at Serge, whose head peeked out from under the sofa in a cobweb veil, and at Blanche, who at that moment knocked over a vase with an olive branch. Symbolic. The Greek world collapsed. "Guillaume," I said softly, "you're afraid, aren't you?" He froze. "What are you more afraid of? That I'll grow old, or that I won't fit your world's picture?" He lowered his eyes, silent. "Maybe I'm scared you end up unprotected, without a plan." I sighed. "Did you ever think, maybe I already have a plan?" Maëlys opened her mouth to speak, but I was already on my feet. "I'm not going to a residence. Not until I decide myself." I smiled. "But you'll finish the tart. It's made with love. Even if you're allergic to it." We ate it in silence. The plum's tart sweetness pricked the tongue like an unspoken question. After they left, I closed the door and pressed myself against it. Blanche jumped down from the cabinet. Serge rubbed against my leg. My retinue. My witnesses. I picked up the real estate flyer, held it in my hands, and put it in a drawer. For storage, out of sight, far from the heart. Chapter 4. After Guillaume and Maëlyse's visit, I stayed silent for 2 days. Not aloud. I spoke to the cats, to the kettle, to the television, to the buns. But inside me, there was a muffled quiet, the kind you feel before a storm, only instead of lightning, doubts, and instead of thunder, thoughts. I wandered through the house, glancing into the rooms. Each kept its own version of me. There, the bedroom with lace curtains I sewed when I first got married. There, Clara's room, still with her poster of The Cure and a note on the wall. Mom, don't forget, I love you. She's grown, but still a girl. Guillaume's room has been empty for a long time. He took everything, even the books he once promised to leave. Read this, Mom. It's about economics for normal people. I read one. I lasted to page 3. I walked to the cupboard where I kept an old notebook. Gray, squared paper with rounded corners. Once I'd written recipes in it, later important phone numbers. Now inside, I found something else. Between the pages, a folded sheet titled CCI Lyon Métropole. Small business support. I took it out. The paper smelled of thyme and faintly of nutmeg. From the nearby page with a Christmas fruitcake recipe. The phone was old. Probably doesn't work anymore. I picked up the receiver. I remembered how, in my youth, I was afraid to call a pizzeria. Now, I'm calling to talk about business, life. You're funny. CCI Lion, good day, came a cheerful voice. I almost hung up. Hello. My name is Jean Patin. I would like to speak about catering. On the other end, silence. Then, certainly, madame. You'd like a consultation? I think so. We have a small business program. Have you already started preparations? I have a notebook. That's already a start. When is it convenient for you? And that's how it began. I set down the phone and sat for several minutes. Serge jumped into my lap. Blanche snorted. If you could have seen me when I called the school, I told them. I was trembling much more then. I went to the kitchen to look for a recipe for a perfect sourdough starter. I'd long wanted to try something new. The day was clear. Sunlight lay on the windowsill. Blanche immediately claimed that spot. She always occupies the best place. In that sense, she reminds me of Maëlyse, only fluffier and smelling of fur coat. I imagined myself at the consultation. In a suit? No. Too formal. In a dress? Too summery. I settled on a gray skirt and a light blue wrap-style blouse. Then I pictured myself saying, "Hello, I'm Jeanne. I want to cook, because that's the only thing I truly know how to do." And perhaps for the first time in many years, I did not feel shame at this sentence. Not, "This is all I can do," but "This is what I can do." The next day I went to the pharmacy for hand cream, and while I was at it, I bought a new pen. Blue, with a soft gel refill. Because if you start, you might as well start beautifully. I wrote down the meeting time. Tuesday, 14:30, CCI Lyon Métropole. The word meeting looked impressive next to my notes about omelet recipes and zucchini prices. Meanwhile, Serge and Blanche staged their cat ball chase, pure feline anarchy. I sat on the sofa, notebook on my knees, and wrote a header, La cuisine de Jeanne. Under it, the first word, flavor. Then, an empty page. And for the first time in many years, I was not afraid of a blank page. I knew. Soon it would be filled with something real. Chapter 5. If they gave me a coin for every time I wanted to postpone that meeting, I wouldn't be going to CCI for support. I'd open a cafe called At Procrastinations. But Tuesday came, just like it promised, and with it, morning anxiety, damp palms, and the little voice in my head. Jean, are you sure you're not overdoing it? 62? Registering a business? That voice sounded eerily like my son's. I snorted. The cat sensed something was wrong. Serge stalked after the hem of my skirt. Blanche ignored me as always, but in her gaze read, "You are going somewhere today, not where you usually go." I don't like that. They love stability, though in a house where on Sundays, buns fly from the oven to the floor and mushrooms may start simmering in the middle of the night. Stability is a relative concept. I went outside. It was a warm September in Lyon, and the city smelled of cafes, damp foliage, and of the buns from the bakery around the corner, the ones with slightly burnt crusts that I'd sue over if I didn't love them so hopelessly. The building of CCI Lyon Metropole turned out to be a concrete block with a lot of glass, automatic doors, and walls so white that I immediately felt like a blot on a pristine sheet. At the reception sat a girl with a hairstyle that said, "I didn't sleep today." "Because I was building unicorns in Figma, Madame?" she asked. "Yes," I replied. "Please come in, office 304. Your mentor is Sylvie Sandler." I walked down the corridor like on a bridge across a shark-infested sea called doubt. What if I turn out to be useless? What if this is a foolish idea? What if they say catering is for people with MBAs, not with pickled cucumbers? The office was small, like a hat box, with bookshelves, 2 chairs, the smell of markers and coffee from a vending machine. Sylvie Sandler turned out to be a woman of about 45, with short chestnut hair and eyes that carried fatigue, professionalism, and a drop of kindness. "Madame Patin?" "Jeanne." "Good. Jeanne, what do you have?" I pulled out my notebook, that very battered one, with folded corners, a cherry syrup stain, and recipes written long ago, back when I believed olive oil was a luxury and teriyaki was a disease. "Here, these are my notes." "Wow." Sylvie's finger traced the line, "mashed potato with nutmeg for 40 people. "I have budget calculations," I added, "and a tentative menu for corporate clients and small events." She looked at me intently, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with interest. That was new. "Jeanne, why didn't you start earlier?" she asked. I shrugged. "House, children, husband, then grandchildren, then fear," she nodded. "I understand. But now I want what I know how to do, to work for me. So, catering? On-the-go kitchen?" "Yes, for small groups to start." "License? Application submitted. Estimated budget?" "Here." I handed her a second page, where I'd neatly written numbers with a colored pen. She smiled. "How long have you been doing this?" "My whole life. Only now, officially." Sylvie looked at me a few more seconds, then closed the notebook. "All right, then we launch." "We?" I asked. "You, of course. But with our help. We have a program. 2 months. You'll be attached to a mentor. First step, kitchen rental. No la table partagée?" I nodded. "Strict place, yes? Like Jules Verne's kitchen, but it teaches fast." I exhaled. Sylvie stood and shook my hand. "You already have a business. Now, you just have to let it grow." I smiled and walked out feeling I held not just a notebook, but a new chance. The sun hit my eyes. Serge jumped onto my shoulders, checking whether I'd turned into someone else. I hadn't changed. I was the same. But now, I'm moving forward. Chapter 6. Since I walked out of Sylvie's office, I've been wandering the house with a notebook in one hand and a kettle in the other, hardly letting go of either. The notebook, because a clear, slightly frightening thought had taken hold in my head. Now it's for real. The kettle, because for the French, tea isn't a tradition, you know, but therapy, especially if you throw in a thin slice of ginger and a bit of honey. The same honey I used once to comfort Clara through her first unrequited love. It didn't help then, but now she always adds it to her Aperol. The house seemed changed. Same walls, same windows, the same creak in the 5th floorboard in the corridor, but the air was different, full of electricity, hope, and a little bit of fear. Like life realized I got up from the spare bench and is now preparing for me the first real half. Serge was sleeping on the windowsill like a dandy. Blanche was standing over the most important envelope, the one with the kitchen rental paperwork, in a full demonstration of sabotage. In the kitchen, order, a rarity. I even reorganized the spices. Now they're in alphabetical order. Honestly, turmeric before bay leaf. Like an accountant, but with paprika. Everything went smoothly until Friday evening. At 18:12, Guillaume called. As always, 8 minutes before I planned to set the dough to rise. "Mom, hi, are you home?" "Yes, like for the past 20 years. "I'll stop by. 5 minutes." I had a choice. To say no. Not convenient. I have a meeting with a business angel. but I just sighed. Okay. He came with a box of macarons and a face full of complicated emotions. Concern, severity, and some hidden calculation. Mom, I saw your open tabs on the laptop. I froze. I just wanted to show you the pension news. And there was a site with rentable kitchens and a business plan. Are you really planning to launch catering? His tone was like a tax inspector who caught me trying to sell meringues without a license. Yes, I answered calmly. I am. Mom, this is madness. You're alone, no investors, no stamina. This isn't buns for a summer cottage. It's the market. There's competition, food poisoning, responsibility, stress, lawsuits. You forgot death, fires, and bloodshed. I'm serious. It's dangerous. If you wreck your health, who'll take care of you? I will. You don't have insurance, but I have eggs and flour. He sighed and paced through the kitchen. I won't let you throw everything away. I'm ready to pay for your move into that residence. If not now, in 6 months. I already discussed terms. With who? With a lawyer. With Miley's. We need to know what to do with your property. There it was. Not concern. Control. I walked to the table, opened my laptop. On the screen, a spreadsheet. Weekly groceries purchase. I selected the entire sheet, clicked save, closed the lid. Guillaume, go. Mom, please, leave. He froze. I only want you safe. I know, but not at that price. He left without slamming the door. That was always him. Restraint, even in attempts to save the world. I sat in silence, hands shaking. Serge came and nudged me sideways, awkwardly, like a small calf. Blanche settled at my feet, as if saying, We're here. We don't try to control. We just stay close. I picked up the notebook, opened it to a blank page. I wrote, Activation, start phase. Then I took the phone and dialed Sylvie. This is Jeanne. We continue, as we said. Great, Madame Patin, she replied. No, Madame, just Jeanne, and I have nowhere to retreat. I hung up. I grabbed the whisk and started kneading dough for the boldest batch of cookies in my life. Chapter 7. The entire next day I spent in silence, but not that cozy, bun-scented morning silence. This was the silence after an earthquake, when the cups still tremble in the cupboard and you sit on the floor, not sure what collapsed, the ceiling or your faith in stability. Serge crawled into the cupboard and didn't come out until lunch. I pictured him holding the kitchen handle from inside, and I laughed. Blanche sprawled over the laptop keyboard, as if about to write to Sylvie. Don't mind her son. He's just an anxious accountant. I wanted to talk to Clara, but I kept postponing. Not because I was afraid. No, just awkward somehow. Since she moved to Nantes, our conversations happen more by message than by voice. In the evening, I finally called. Mom, everything okay? Her tone was like she had a mouse in one hand, coffee in the other, and a third, virtual hand trying to hug me. I closed my eyes. Hi, got 5 minutes? Of course. Just turning off my camera. The designer's on a meltdown. Client's already hitting the cream. I sat on a kitchen stool, watching the screen. After a moment, her smile appeared. Hair messy, stretched tank top, in the corner. 4 mugs with different drinks. She always drank from all of them at once, since childhood. What happened? She asked. I told her. About the laptop, about Guillaume, about, we already talked to the lawyer, and, you can't handle this. Clara didn't interrupt, just nodded. And? I threw him out. Good for you. But you should have called Blanche. She's an expert in contemptuous looks. One would have done the job. I laughed. She's my daughter. No doubt. Mom, she said, do you realize you finally do what you've always wanted? At 62? At 62? Perfect. Less competition. People believe you. You have history. And most importantly, you have taste. I also have muscles, I replied. Guillaume thinks I can't carry a 6-liter pot. Well, we won't tell him that when I was 13, I carried 13 jars of walnut jam to my neighbors, just because I was in love with her son. I opened my mouth. You read my diary? I asked. Mom, I'm a designer. I know how to find information. We laughed again. Then she got serious. Listen, you're not alone. If you really want to start the catering business, I'm with you. I'll make you a logo, style, website, visuals, everything. You sure? You have? Mom, please. I have 100 projects and not one smells like cinnamon and nutmeg. I need this. She looked at me through the camera, and in her eyes was the same determination she'd had when, at 7, she ate 5 tangerines in a row to prove it wasn't too much. You'll have a brand. Warm, alive, real. La cuisine de Jean? I guessed timidly. Perfect. Isn't it too simple? No, it's you. I felt my throat go dry, not from fear. That feeling, once in youth called inspiration, and now, a surge. Okay, but promise me, no logo of a cat holding a ladle. Too late. She grinned. It already has an apron. We talked late. She told me about her project, a ceramics brand for the Japanese market, where cups are asymmetrical, because that's more beautiful. I thought, okay, she succeeds. Why not me? Start with a wonky cup, and then see what happens. When we hung up, I stared at the dark screen for a long time. My notebook lay on the table. I opened it and wrote, La cuisine de Jean, with love and butter. Underneath, the name, Clara, art director, daughter, sous chef of my happiness. Chapter 8. I arrived at La Table Partagée on Monday. It wasn't a kitchen so much as a temple, storage warehouse and battlefield rolled into one. And it didn't smell like a cozy home. It smelled of disinfectant, sautéed spinach, and a faint whiff of panic. The building was concrete, industrial, in a gray neighborhood. Above the door, a sign reading Partage, the letters almost worn off, as though even the building doubted the idea of sharing. Inside, metal, glass, and cold. Not emotionally, physically. So chilly that my knees started remembering every rainy week from the past decade. Leah Makal met me by the counter, without a word. Her hair tied back, sauce stain on her t-shirt, eyes like a woman who's already survived 3 delivery services, 2 inexperienced cooks, and 1 bechamel-related fire. Jean Patin? She asked. Yes, 15 hours per week approved. Rules are on the wall. Break them. You're out. I nodded. No tasting then? She squinted. This isn't Tinder. You don't fall in love at first glance here. Only speed and cleanliness matter. I nodded again. I know how to clean. Since I was 3, Grandma handed me a bowl and said, if you want to help, start from the end. Good start, she said. She handed me an apron that read, the chef is always right, even when she's not. Clear enough. The kitchen was divided into sections. Cold station, hot line, bakery, prep zone. People used it from all walks, from startups to food rebel types. One guy was making wasabi jams. Another girl created lavender burgers. I quietly picked a corner by the window and started unloading. Butter, knives, containers, zip bags. By 9 a.m., I was already chopping carrots with such concentration, like sitting for an exam. And, as in an exam, the stove beside me hissed. A neighbor's oil flared up. He shouted, eyes wide, Madam, there's a fire! Not my line, I said calmly. I'm in the peaceful zone. I deal in vegetables and silence. Without looking, Leah switched off the stove with one hand, dropped a damp towel over the pot, and said, Learn the rules. Don't touch other stuff, even if their stove's on fire. She spoke like a sergeant, but without anger. Her kitchen, her rules. I began putting little muffin dough containers into the fridge. On each, a sticker, Jean, caramel and salt. Do not touch, even if you're dying. Labels commanded respect. At lunch, I had already worked half the day when a scent drifted over me. Lavender and apple, and memory. I was 6 years old. Grandma held an apple in her hand, sprinkled it with sugar and said, when you bake with lavender, don't overdo it, Jeanette. People don't want soap. They want happiness. I froze with the apple in my hand. Everything okay? Asked Leah, passing by. Yes, I said. I was remembering the right amount of happiness, she smiled. Good, just don't forget. We have timers here. Happiness is on schedule. I baked a test batch of mini tarts with chicken and parsley cream. I wasn't planning to share them, but the smell gave me away. The wasabi jam guy walked over to me. Madame Jean, would you like to try some? I took the spoon and tasted. Interesting. Kind of dessert. But the bite hits different. It's a concept. He shrugged. Your concept's bold, I answered. I wouldn't take it out on a date. We both laughed. He turned out friendly. Leia passed by. Good job. But don't get comfortable. On this kitchen, only the spices relax. That evening, I wiped down the table, labeled 2 more containers, and wrote in my notebook, Day 1. Didn't die, didn't spoil, didn't get fired. Success. Serge met me at the door with a look that said, Mom, dear Mom, how I love you. Blanche, silent as usual, full of judgment. I poured a glass of wine, ate 1 mini tart, crispy, a little salty. The taste turned out honest. And truth be told, I was as tired as after 3 weddings. But inside, there was light. Chapter 9. The first order didn't come as a wave of glory, more like a quiet knock. Not literally, but in the form of a message from one of Clara's acquaintances. Jean, we're hosting a yoga day for 10 people and need lunch. Something light, homemade, delicious. Would you be up for it? I read the message 3 times. First, as a mother. Then, as an entrepreneur. Then, as Jean, 62 years old, with exactly 1 kilo of marinated artichokes in the fridge and 0 grams of confidence. I replied, gladly. Just no tofu or overly philosophical expectations. They said yes. Next morning, I got to the kitchen earlier than anyone. Even earlier than Leia, who walked in, raised an eyebrow, and said, Did you sleep here? Mentally, yes. The menu was simple, but made with heart. Tabbouleh with mint and pine nuts. Tart with ricotta, spinach, and caramelized onion. Mini lemon lavender cakes. And my secret weapon, homemade rosemary aioli, I call it. Anxiety killer aioli. Doesn't always help, but it's a beautiful distraction. I chopped, sautéed, and baked. By noon, everything was ready. I carefully packed the food into thermal containers and labeled each one like a pharmacist. Don't mix up with mint, gluten-free, but made with love. A neighbor drove the food over. In his old van that smells like motor oil and freedom. I stayed behind, alone in the kitchen. And then came the strangest silence. Everything was done. The dishes were gone. Just me, a sink full of pans, and one question hanging in the air. What if they don't like it? In moments like this, knowing how to cook isn't enough. You don't feel like a chef. You feel like someone who's put everything on a plate and now waits to hear whether it's a meal or cute. But 2 hours passed. The message came at 3:42 p.m. Jean, everything was incredible. Seriously, we're in love. Count on us for the next yoga retreat. You're a gem. I read it 3 times, like a schoolgirl staring at her first A+. Then I sat down and cried. No sobs, just quiet tears. Of relief, of joy, of finally knowing the fear wasn't worth it. And yes, I still can. I made myself a coffee, opened my notebook, and wrote, First order, $120, minus kitchen rent, groceries, transport, $28 left. Pure joy, priceless. That evening, Clara called via video. She took one look at my face. Well, the survivors were pleased. Perfect. You can start working on the website. Already did. It'll be warm, with a story. Photos, with a full shoot. Roxane's doing it. That food photographer friend? The one with the piercings and the dog that looks like Edith Piaf? Exactly. And just like that, with 1 plate of tabbouleh, my professional life began. Not loud, not glamorous, but real. And whatever my son might say, I'm not retired. I'm just getting started. Chapter 10. Accounting has never been my element. But after my first order, like any normal woman, I picked up a calculator and opened the spreadsheet Clara made in Google Sheets. She called it Jean, Empire of Taste. Mom, you need to record everything, even salt, even gloves, even those midnight cakes you eat just to check. She teased. I nodded, took a breath, then reached for another cake. Quality control is sacred. I worked out that after subtracting everything, rent, ingredients, gas for Jean-Luc's van, the neighbor with the oily van and a smell of haute Savoie, I was left with 28 euros and a feeling of absolute freedom. I even thought, maybe with those 28 euros, I'll buy a candle smelling of success or a book titled How to Stop Being Afraid and Start Frying. Instead, I bought a kilo of flour and a liter of olive oil. Because you have to keep going. Keep going. Or so I thought. Then the call came. From Guillaume, his tone official, as though he were not a son, but the chair of a committee assessing my sanity. Mom, Maëlys and I ran the numbers. You know the utility bills, the insurance, the house maintenance? We've been covering those for 3 years now? I know, I answered calmly. Because we had an agreement. Exactly, he sighed. A rent agreement. You live in peace, and we cover the expenses. In return, the house will eventually be ours. Right, I smiled. Sounded very poetic when we signed it, almost like a marriage vow. Mom, we can't carry it anymore. With the kids, the mortgage, work, we're in the red. You know I'm in the red too? I asked. What kind of red? In spirit, I whispered. Massive plus in spirit. He didn't laugh. Humor's never been his strong side. Numbers or crisis. Mom, this is serious. We thought, maybe it's best to sell the house while we still can. Guillaume, I said softly. A rent agreement is not a sign that nothing will ever fall apart. It was your promise for the rest of your days, Mom. Do you remember? I even baked a cake for Maëlys when we signed. We didn't expect this pressure. Pressure? I laughed. The only pressure I know is in a pressure cooker, and it handles it just fine. Serge jumped onto my lap, purring like a notary ready to sign every word. Blanche watched from the cupboard, always on contract inspection duty. I picked up my notebook and the mother-of-pearl pen Clara had gifted me. For life-changing signatures, or at least grocery lists. So, you got a plan? He asked. I do. It's marinating. Give it time. He didn't approve. Mom, we're worried. This isn't a solution. Have you ever been afraid of feeling useless? I asked. He went silent. Even through the receiver, I could hear him searching for an answer and not finding one. Then fine. I'll pay for the electricity, the water, the gas, food, the house, myself. Even if it gets hard, especially if it gets hard. We were quiet. Then he sighed heavily. Mom, you understand, this means our agreement stays just that, an agreement. But with a correction. From now on, I pay for my own life. And the house can wait. Houses have more patience than children, you know. He hung up. Serge nudged me sideways. Blanche gave me a disdainful yawn. The witnesses of accusation turned into witnesses of defense. Chapter 11. I served myself mashed potatoes, with butter, with love, and I added a pinch of black pepper. Because that day, I think I grew up. I opened the notebook, drew a wobbly new signature, and muttered, new contract, with myself. I'll pay for electricity, water, and gas, and dividends I'll collect in freedom. Serge backed me with a quick meow, like applause at a shareholders' meeting. Blanche carefully placed her paws on the open page, as if stamping it. Approved for execution? I know. All these papers, signatures, rents, they mean nothing if your children are tired of their commitments. The next day, I walked through the house. I sold the old bookshelf, a couple of armchairs with an 80s flair, and a porcelain vase I never really loved, but kept because it felt valuable. I posted the ads. A neighbor, Lucy, asked, Are you moving out? No, I told her. I'm staying. Just making room for myself. I recalculated the budget. For the first time in my life, a sheet of expenses didn't send me into panic. Just numbers. Just tasks. Just life. Clara sent the logo. Warm. Without cats. With a thin line that reminded me of steam rising from a pot. Under it, La cuisine de Jeanne. Cuisine de cœur. I smiled. My heart felt calm because I knew now I am my own light and my own gas. And the fire under the pot. If someone had told me 10 years ago that one day I'd meet a business mentor, I would have answered, thank you, I already have enough. The cats think I'm their personal chef, a night warmer, and their servant on the side. But life Like an old oven. Loves surprises, Sylvie from CCI said. We have someone, experienced, worked with restaurants, wineries, food startups. He'll help you scale up. I nodded, as if I knew what scale up meant. Then I went to the internet. It turned out, it's not a cosmetic operation. It's far scarier. Real business growth. With numbers, goals, words like B2B and market segments. We met in a cafe by the station. The place was a mix of inexpensive brasserie and library, shelves of books, a waiter with a tablet, the smell of coffee, and political debates. Renaud Vian turned out to be a man in his 50s, rare beard, eyes like someone who reads Proust and calculates margins at the same time. Checked shirt, notebook, glasses on a chain. He looked at me the way a chef looks at dough, checking if I will rise. Jeanne, I heard about your catering. Rumors travel fast? I smiled. Sylvie told me. She said, she's off format, but she cooks with fire. Fire comes from my oven. The thermostat's got character. He chuckled. Good. Let's start with the basics. Who are you cooking for? For now? Myself. And for a yoga group whose appetite, I think, exceeds their enlightenment. He made a note. You work in the private segment, but that has a ceiling. If you want to grow, you go corporate. Meaning, company breakfasts, catering for presentations, banquets for launches, for doctors, lawyers, startups, bigger budgets, stronger referrals. And how do you break in? Through respect, through stability, through history. You have everything, you just need to formalize it. He opened a laptop, showed slides, tables, charts. I nodded, not always understanding, but I suddenly felt he talks not to a granny, but to a partner. It felt nice. Do you have a son working in the corporate sector? He asked. Yes, that's an asset. That's a dangerous asset. He doesn't have to run things, but if he's already in the network, you can use that as a position of strength. I looked out the window. Lion lived its life. Traffic jams, bicycles, pigeons that probably discussed my tarts. And how do you handle strength when you're not sure you have it? I asked. Renaud looked at me carefully. Strength isn't muscles. It's the certainty that you know what you're doing. And you know. Too well to hide it in a microwave. We said goodbye. He shook my hand firmly. In a month, I want to see you in action. You'll have a corporate order. Will you deliver? I will, if I don't burn in the process. Burning is part of flavor, so long as it isn't literal. On my way back, I walked slowly. My phone pinged with a message from Sylvie. Contact, Groupe Médical des Berges. They need catering for a business lunch. They'd like a tasting. I smiled. They thought they'd taste my food. What they'll taste is my courage. Chapter 12. The morning before the tasting began like a spy movie. I woke up at 5:20, like for an exam. The cats didn't like it. Serge gave me that you again look. Blanche stormed into the bathroom and started knocking soap bars off the shelves in protest. I got up, made coffee, switched the stove on. While the toasts browned, I checked the list. Goat cheese, honey, and nut tartlets. Ready? Mini crostini with chicken, parsley, and lemon yogurt cream. Packed. Vegetarian canapes with chickpea cream and caramelized pepper. To chill, with mint added before serving. Dessert, forest berry cake with mint cream, still in progress. On the paper, Clara had scribbled in bold. Remember, you're not casting. You are the culinary film. I kissed that note like a prayer card. Then we headed to La Table Partagée. Leia was already there. You look like someone who's afraid the sauce will curdle, she said. I'm afraid it's the cake, I answered. Even scarier. She smirked. She helped me load the boxes into Jean-Luc's van, off to the riverside, to the offices of Groupe Médical des Berges. Big glass building. Clean. Inside, the scent of sanitizer and lemongrass. The reception greeted us politely, but strictly. I felt like both a chef and a patient. In the elevator, my heart pounded. I repeated in my head, you know how to cook. You know how to breathe. You survived Guillaume. You'll handle this inspection. In the conference room waited 8 people. Mr. Tippin, the chief doctor, eyes that saw everything. failed operations, nurses' weddings. Around him, assistants, accountant, PR director, dietitian, who looked at me as if I were walking sugar. I began setting out the dishes, everything by the book, labels, cards, measured portions, like a presidential banquet, minus the scandals. Clara did the staging, a banner with the logo, wooden boards, linen napkins. For a moment, I felt like I was running my own restaurant. Just temporarily. Tippin nodded. "Please, tell us what you brought," he asked. I spoke, not quickly, not rehearsed. From the heart. About goat cheese, picked in the market back in my childhood, and how Grandma always added honey to make life sweeter. About the crostini, how a neighbor once called them evening dress sandwiches. About the aioli, how it helps when you feel like swearing, but you can't. And then, disaster struck. I opened the container with the cake and saw an apocalypse on 3 layers. The cream had melted, the berries had sunk. One side of the cake looked like it had had an emotional breakdown. The other side didn't even try to follow. I froze. A second, maybe I should throw everything out, claimed someone stole my oven, or that I present a new dessert concept, anti-cake? But then I spotted the little plastic cups, the spare ones. Plan B, always in my purse, especially when Plan A decides to melt before your eyes. I grabbed cream, berries, some mini sponge pieces, and right there, on the white table, assembled a traditional French trifle, version polite catastrophe. Layers, mint, a drizzle of syrup, a couple of lavender petals on top. It looked like I meant to do it. Smelled like a rainfall at a farmer's market. I served the first glass and smiled. "This is an experiment," I told them. Tipin raised an eyebrow. "A new dessert?" he asked. "A new take on old panic," I said. I served the second portion. "A dessert without pretension, but with good manners," I said. "When I was 8, my grandmother once dropped a pie. We scooped it up with spoons, added honey, and it became the best pie of my life. Since then I've known, if a dessert has heart, sugar will show up." They laughed. Tipin tasted first. He chewed slowly, watched me like a doctor reading an X-ray. Then, he nodded. "This is very human. Thank you." The contract. Signed. The waiters cleared the trays. I slipped the ruined cake into a bag. It looked like an old love, still sweet, but better left untouched. I stepped outside. The sun was shining. In my hands, a contract. In my head, silence. In my heart, exhilaration. Leia texted, "You alive?" I answered, "Yes," and the trifle landed better than a man offering roses. Chapter 13. When the contract with the clinic was signed, I spent 2 days walking around the house like an Olympian, equal parts pride and muscle ache. Serge, happy, as if he had negotiated with Tipin. Blanche, indulgent, as though she thought, "Sure, you did good, but try feeding me without a 2-minute delay next time, and you'll see who the real businesswoman is here." On Monday, right in the middle of morning sourdough prep, the intercom rang. On the screen, Guillaume. He stood there with a bag. Inside, coffee, 2 croissants, and the expression, "I come in peace, but if needed, I'm a lawyer." I opened the door. Maëlys came in too, in an elegant blouse colored, "I'm not judging, I just know better." They came into the kitchen. I set the kettle on. Maëlys complimented my apron. I complimented her manicure. We were polite, like politicians before the first blow. Guillaume sat and dove in right away. "Mom, me and Maëlys wanted to talk." "With a lawyer again?" I asked. "No, with an offer." "Mortgage?" Maëlys laughed softly. "We want to help." "You helped already when you cut off the utilities." "Yes," said Guillaume, "but you managed. Thanks for noticing." He pulled out a folder. "We've made a list of potential clients, business contacts, partners. We could give you the leads, set up meetings, and offer your catering for a commission." "What commission?" I asked. 15%. I looked at him. Long. In my head ran everything, from the laptop breach to the words, "This is not a business." And now he comes with a folder, with percentages, with a new tactic. "Guillaume," I said calmly, "I appreciate you believing in my cooking. It's not just belief." Maëlys jumped in. "We see you can handle it. Thanks." I nodded, but I'm not at the stage where I need intermediaries. He froze. "We could expand your reach." He tried again. "I could expand the oven," I replied. "But for now, this one's enough." "This isn't about control, Mom." "Of course it is. It's about business. But my business? It's not just food. It's me." Maëlys opened her mouth to protest, but I kept going. "I have a team. Sylvie, Leia, Clara, Jean-Luc and his van, even Blanche and Serge, if you want." "We only meant well," he said quietly. "I know," I answered. "But meant well can't mean stepping on someone else's roots after they've grown them." I stood up, pointed at the pear pie on the table. "Want a slice? No percentages. Just for you." They ate it in silence. Maëlys had 2 pieces. Guillaume nodded in thanks. Before leaving, he said, "You've changed. I've just finally become myself." They left. I closed the door, not in anger, with respect for myself. As they walked away, I noticed Guillaume didn't release my hand right away. Maybe this time, he really heard me. Blanche yawned. Serge meowed. A piece of cobweb dangled from his ear. Again, I'm starting to suspect he collects them on purpose. I walked to knead the sourdough bread with a new recipe. Today, lemon and blueberry. No middleman, but with confidence. Chapter 14. When Sylvie called and said, "Jean, we have a proposal. Can you handle it? Depends on the number of guests." 300. "Jean? Sorry, I'm choking on my breath." 300 guests. An official event. The awards of CCI Lyon Métropole. Stage, medals, photo zones, and local stars. And me, La Cuisine de Jean, a stage in life I never even allowed myself to imagine. Even when I baked an apple caramel pie and thought, what if the president eats this? Even then, I felt those stages belonged to others. Clara took on all the visual work. "We need warmth, a story, no shouting. That means no cats on the apron? Well, maybe a small one." Leia and I assigned tasks like battlefield commanders. I, the kitchen. She, logistics. An order for 300 people is not just lots of food. It's like a wedding, but without kisses. And with double the stress. The menu. Dishes memories. Everything I've carried in me for years finally became not just taste, but part of a story. Mini shots of celery puree soup with fried onions, like the one Grandma made when the whole family was sick. A warm gulp that brings you back to care. Little toasts with pesto and walnuts, like summer in the village when there was nothing but basil and happiness. Little crunchy memories of green vacations. Mini lentil patties with yogurt sauce. My protest against dull vegetarian food. Filling, bright, with character. Herb lemon butter chicken fillet. Tenderness and strength in one piece. For those who think no meat, no celebration, warm salad with baked pumpkin, feta, and seeds. A reminder that life can be sweet, salty, and crunchy at once. Balance and lightness. And the finale, dessert following Grandma's recipe, but with Clara's signature twist. They were mini verrines, 3 times, bottom layer, rum sponge, childhood, middle, caramel with citrus, maturity, top, lemon thyme mousse, what's to come. In one spoon, my entire life. As Clara said herself, "This dessert is like you." What? Unstable? No, layered, and it leaves an aftertaste. We cooked for 3 days, slept 3 hours each night. I was talking to beans at dawn, Clara to sauces. Leia was setting timers on pans and muttering, "If we survive, I'll do my nails red." Symbol of victory. And we survived. We loaded everything into the vans. We arrived at the site 5 hours before the start. At the place, chaos, cables, journalists, organizers, flowers, toasters, hosts in suits. And me, in a black apron with a gold inscription, La Cuisine de Jean, Taste of Life. We arranged everything. Did a trial run. Rehearsed the serving. I whispered under my breath. Grandma, if you hear me, hold the sky a bit so it doesn't fall. Opening. Applause. First guest. The mayor. Second, a TV host with a cappuccino voice. I smiled, plated dishes, explained. Yes, that's homemade pâté. Yes, that's baked carrot, not salmon. Yes, we use butter, but never heaviness. Feedback came like drops into a pot. It's unexpected. It's warm. It reminds me of childhood, but tastier. Then, the awards. I was nominated for Entrepreneur of the Year, Mature Start. I sat in the chair like a schoolgirl at the blackboard, holding a napkin and a small bag of nuts, just in case. The name was announced quietly, as if in passing. Jean Patin, La Cuisine de Jean, stage, lights, applause. I went up. In the hall, Clara, Leah, Sylvie, Serge, and Blanche, in my thoughts, and Grandma, somewhere near, holding a pot and smiling. I said, I started cooking because they said, if you know how, then do. Then I stopped because they said, that's just food. Then I started again because I realized if something works in your life, don't hide it in a drawer. Applause, pictures, flowers. Clara cried. Leah laughed. Me, I stood, straight, whole, hands full, and heart empty. I mean, without fear. I came home late that night, opened the fridge. There, a single mini verrine 3 times. I ate it slowly, as though I could stop time along with the spoon. The taste was like life, sweet, bitter, and mine. And tomorrow, a new recipe. Because kitchen life is never a period. It's always a comma. Chapter 15. A few days later, when the adrenaline had settled, like dough after kneading, I decided to open the drawer with the important papers. Inside, old bills, recipe clippings from a 1984 magazine, and one familiar, slightly crumpled flyer. Residence, home under the sun. Comfort, care, security, where life continues. Beautifully, I held it in my hands. The paper edges had yellowed, like the crust of a pie you forgot to take out of the oven. On the cover was the same woman with pearls and perfect hair, looking off into the distance, as if behind her was not a parking lot or a pharmacy, but her own personal horizon. I placed the flyer back into the drawer, closed it, and, for the first time, without sadness, I knew this wasn't my road. I stepped onto the veranda. September had returned to be September again, not a mad sprint. The air smelled of apples and woodbark. On the table sat a jar labeled Nuts, 2015, my last batch. Clara came out carrying a tray. On it, a bowl of warm dough, a jar of jam, and our favorite wooden spoon. Shall we cook? She asked. We shall, I said. Serge slept curled up on the armchair. Blanche watched through the window like a guard on duty. She now had a new bowl, engraved with Chief Taste Tester. She's proud of it, and doesn't let Serge near it. Fair and predictable. Clara and I stood by the stove. The jam bubbled. The house smelled of childhood, cinnamon, lemon, of everything that only exists where things have finally fallen into place. Do you remember what Grandma used to say? Clara asked. That to make good jam, you must be in a good mood. And you? In the best one. I'm in my kitchen. With you. With myself. Clara was silent a moment, then said, Mom, do you realize this is your main business plan? Simply to be yourself. With jam. We spooned jam into jars, signed the date. Clara took one and drew a heart on it. This one stays here. A symbol. I sat on a chair, looked out the window. The sky was as clear as a blank sheet. And I knew. I have something to fill it with. La Cuisine de Jean. It's not just catering. It's the taste of life, with a pinch of patience and a drop of vanilla. And if someone says, too late to start, I'll answer, dough doesn't like being rushed either. If you're listening, that means you were with me, with my plates, fears, jam, and cats. You laughed where I stumbled, and maybe found a bit of your own story between the anise bun and the silence of an old house. Let me tell you this, it's never too late. It's not shameful. To begin, to falter, to fall silent, and then to start talking again. Each of us has a story, not necessarily big, loud, heroic, but real. One with taste, mistakes, love, loneliness, one kept in a drawer next to the apron we haven't worn in ages. Tell your story. Here, in the comments. Without shame, without editors, it would mean the world to me. Because when one woman shares truth, another stops being afraid to taste her own. With warmth, Jean, who no longer hides her recipe notebook,